Oh, okay. Thank you. Well, the First Grace of Initiation. I once wrote a poem called "Grace S. Grace," and the way the poem unfolded is, I think if God had a first name, it would be Grace, and if God had a last name, it would be Grace, and then the middle initial would be S. And for me, the S stands for surprise. This transcendent thing that we've labeled with these three words, which can get in the way as much as help. Uh, God, the Jewish folk are, they're probably a little wiser than we are because they don't print the whole word. In translation to English, it's G underscore no O and then D. So they're not saying the word, they're not printing the word because they know if you put it in a word, then if it's this, it can't be that. And that flies in the face of what it means to be transcendent and boundless, this kind of energy we're dealing with, which I call the way we experience in this human realm is this sense of grace and surprise. Um, and so just this whole thing is grace. The reason, the fact that we're encountering this all today is a product of grace. Uh, Nick is in the my best man and best friend is in the group today, and he can attest to this. Finally, it was a grace that we didn't die in this collision we had up in Holland, Michigan, and so the car was. They worked on it for about 6 weeks. So we were without that car for 6 weeks, but Nick picked us up, and then he also drove me back to get the car. And after we got the car, we stopped by his daughter's house, Kendra, who's a kind of great hippie earth mother. She's a wonderful, wonderful woman, and she's got 7 kids. She homeschools them all. Imagine this, and so Pam and I were outside when the first time when she picked us up from the collision place, and she brought us lemonade and homemade bread and all this. This was wonderful. And then when we went back, we stopped by on the way out of Holland, and I had a gift to give her, or wanted to check about a gift that Pam had sent, and of course she had gifts to give us to take back, Nick and I. But when we went into her kitchen, it was like a whirlwind of kids in motion doing everything. She was making bread from starter to sourdough bread, and so we came in, and I saw a whiteboard on her wall, and it had these 5 points on it with nothing else. 1, life is hard. 2, you're not that important. 3, your life isn't about you. 4, you're not in control. Well, that one I almost couldn't see that one. And then 5, you are going to die. All our kids were looking at this, and I just, it was a deja vu kind of grace experience because I'd seen them before, and I said, are you reading Buddhist texts or something? And she said, oh no, I got a mail out from Richard Rohr, and they were in there, and I just thought I'd put them up. Thought it'd do everybody a little good. And then I remembered it was like, all right, yeah, I'd seen these 20 years earlier, and for some reason grace was bringing it right back into my consciousness. So that was about a month ago. So I've been meditating on this for a month, and I thought it'd be something that'd take more than 20 minutes in our normal heart to heart to sort of tease out. So I want to open this up for you. But again, we're talking about a transformative shift when you upgrade your operating system from childhood operating system, which was beautiful. Here we are. We obviously got out of our family alive, and at least you know how to actually tune into one of these things, or even want to. So it actually launched us. But to go into your life beyond 12 or 13 with that operating system, you can do it. But it becomes more and more painful, especially when you get to the second half of life. So let's backtrack just for a minute before we get to the first point, to look at the essence of the childhood operating system. What got us out of the house? what protected us long enough from whatever our house was like to to actually get into school and to actually start it, be on our own. What was that operating system? Well, I can put it into, Thomas Keating talks about it when he talks about the energy centers, if you know that. And the Enneagrams talked about it for about 1100 years. If you know the Enneagram, just think 6, 3, 9, these three triads of energy there. And the sixth energy is the one word is security, survival. We all start with that because we come out of the womb, can't do anything, breathing air now, bright lights, huge beings running around. I mean, it's overwhelming, and we can't even turn over. We can't feed ourselves. So there we are, and so survival kicks in, okay, it better kick in. And then we don't really have higher cognitive stuff yet, but we sort of have a hunch that woman over there, if I could get her to like me, then she might feed me. And so that's, so security, we got to get some security, and then esteem, if mom likes me, if she's affectionate towards me. And so, that kicks in, this idea of getting people to like me. I got these 5 older brothers, Jesus Christ, how am I going to survive this? Well, maybe I can please them. Maybe I can, make them laugh, whatever. So then we got survival and security, we got affection and esteem. And then around age 2, we're really, strutting around a little bit, and then it's power and control, no, me do it. You don't want mommy to feed you anymore. And, you don't want to, use a diaper anymore. You're going shit behind the couch, all right, me do it. And that's just those 3 energy centers are kicking in. And so that takes another trauma when you go to first grade, or something. You go to nursery school. For me, it was nursery school back in that day, but you go to kindergarten or pre-K or whatever. There's always a little bit of shock because you're not in your family. You had all these, it was sort of worked out. And now most cases, the teacher isn't like your mom. And sometimes that can be traumatic, but you work through it. Maybe school is a kind of hell realm, but you work your way through it. Somewhere along the line, probably ages 3 to 5, you get an inkling that about death, because when Papa was there, now he's not there, and they give you a little narrative about this. Yeah, well, Papa's going, or your dog dies. You can't really make sense of it. It's really not until probably more about 9 or 10 to where you have the ability to actually to grasp a concept. When you talk about how the consciousness moves in a young adult or a baby, and then a young child, and then you start to become adult, and then things happen around 9 or 10. Well, then you could really get the concept of it. So that leads us up to ages 11, 12, 13, right in there. These are key times when primitive societies, which weren't too primitive, actually, they were sort of advanced. This leads us up to the time where they would do an initiation rite to help the boy or the girl become a man or a woman. And actually, these 5 points, I remember reading them about 20 years ago when Richard Rohr was doing a lot of male initiation retreats, because he was just so horrified of how lethal most uninitiated men were in our culture, And so he was doing it, and he used these 5 fierce grace truths to build his initiation on. And so that's I remember it hit a book that was called Adam's Return, and it was all about the need to actually meditate on these 5 truths. So we've got a little time here. We got about a half hour. We'll go to 10 o'clock to meditate on these truths, to actually let them come in. And then we'll have 15 minutes off where you can write a little bit after we talk, and then just relax a bit, or bathroom or whatever you do. And then at 10:15 or whatever time it is for you, 9:15 or wherever it is in France, the quarter after the hour, we'll come back and do another 40 minutes of contemplation, where we can just go into the boundless. and a lot of information comes and goes during that time. So anyway, and then we'll come back, and and then we'll have our a bit of an ability to sit together and to share with what came from the whole day. Okay, so life is hard. Well, tell me about it. I mean, some people say, but what this really means is, Aurora's trying to turn people into the fact that all the great spiritualities, really the mystic traditions in Christianity, Buddhism, Hinduism, Sufism, uh, Taoism, the great 8 major religions that have been around for a long time, all great spirituality is about, they tell you what to do about pain. If you have a kind of spiritual practice or spiritual, community that doesn't tell you what to do with human pain, you got some kind of new age microwave fast food version. Okay, the gospel of prosperity is not about this. The guys in Six Flags Over Jesus somewhere, they're not talking about pain, most likely. They're talking about, they might be talking about abundance, but pain doesn't have any part of it. Well, all great spiritualities know that that we do have pain as human beings, and they want to give you a way to transform it. Because the basic understanding is that unless you transform your human pain, could be physical, could be emotional, could be psychological, could be spiritual, it doesn't matter. Unless you know how to transform your pain, you will transmit it. This is a given rule, and it's expressed differently in, whether you're reading a Rumi poem, or you're reading the Gospels, you have to have a way to transform it. Thank goodness, this group's been working with Tonglen, which is one of the ultimate transformative practices of working with pain, your own and the pain of other people. But you either transform your pain or you transmit it. And other people's pain, because of the way human beings are, becomes your pain. It's just a given because of the way we're created. And we're living in a world of pain. Now, what happens if you don't transform this pain? You're in pain, but you don't transform it. It'll come out in hatred. It'll come out in blame. It'll come out in projecting, It'll come on and looking for a scapegoat. That was a really great classic practice, that one day of the year they'd get together and they get a goat and they put all their sins on the goat and they run the goat out of town. Well, we do it now. It's immigrants, it's Black people, it's white people, it's liberals, it's conservative. We just project that pain on somebody else. So that's a translative kind of relationship. I can't deal with. Sometimes we take it inside, and so it turns out to be self-hatred, self-harm. Too much of that too. Young girls cutting on themselves, etc. So this is the first thing to understand. Now, Simone Weil, the French mystic who lived between the wars, she said something very interesting about grace, because this is a fierce grace. She said, grace fills empty spaces, but it can only enter where there is a void to receive it. Grace fills empty spaces, but it can only enter where there is a void or an opening to receive it. And it is grace itself that makes this void. If you don't have one, grace will make one. That's the meaning of fierce grace. Like a coin. Grace is like a coin, and there's two sides. There's fierce grace. There's friendly grace. Sometimes the fierce grace will give you a wound, and then the friendly grace will heal the wound. But the wound is an entryway for the healing, because we can be all armored up and going through life. Essentially, that's what you do if you run on a childhood operating system, because a childhood operating system is basically defensive, had to be. And so you can go through life all armored up and but you're armored against the actual thing you're looking for. And so inside the armor becomes a castle, the castle becomes a prison. And before you know it, you're feeling lonely, separate, cold, uh, wonder what the hell you're doing here. That's easy to happen. You might feel that. And so, you know, uh, the transcendent soul wants you not to be in that situation. It keeps sending you update messages, and it can't get through. It can't get through. So then it'll poke a little hole in that armor. It'll breach the castle, trying to get you out of jail, trying to get you to go into a whole other way of operating in the world that that deals with that gives you a whole other view. See, so that's one of every one of these points, by the way, and this isn't a kind of linear progression, by the way. Every point is reflected in all the other points. It's like a descending spiral, if anything, but it's a hologram, really. So it's not like you go through these linearly, but the fact that life is hard. So what are they? When the old initiations would happen, uh, in saner cultures that we have, it would happen around 12 or 13 for girls. It would happen when they had a timer built in when they had their first menstrual period, which is a total surprise to most girls unless they've been prepared. I mean, I worked with a woman for many years who told me that when she had her first menstrual period, she had no idea what was going on. She'd just sit in there, and all of a sudden, she's just bleeding through her underwear, and she's crying. And she calls her mother, and her mother comes in and checks it out, and then she disappears. So she's there crying. Then the mother returns and throws a Tampax in and said, "Deal with it." That was it. That was it. Not quite, not quite sufficient. So in the old times, for indigenous cultures that were much saner than ours, they were more primitive, of course. They didn't know have medicine or whatever, but they knew how to help somebody deal with this. The women, not your mother, of course, but the old women would take you out to a secluded place, the red tent, whatever the imagery was, and they would comfort you and say, "Hey, we all know about this. It's not gonna be forever. You're not bleeding forever." But mostly they would give you a new operating system so that at the end of the 3 days or however long it took, when you went back in, and your mother knew about this because the same thing happened to her. You didn't come back as your mother's little girl, as your daddy's little girl. You came back as a woman. Whole different operating system, whole different way of approaching everything. And people saw you then as a woman. The boys, when they weren't as fortunate, they would just, around 12 or 13, they start get dangerous. And so these guys would take them out. The old men would take them out, and they would, secluded place, and they'd almost kill them. You had to inflict a wound on them because they didn't have a built-in upgrade like the young girls. So they would cut them. They would do something. They bury them alive. There's all kinds of different traditions. They try not to kill them, but they want to take them almost like a near-death experience. And then when they came out, they would say, "All right, now you're a man. You go back." Whole different rules set up, and a whole different set of responsibilities now. After this whole thing, in a lot of cultures, you could never, if you were a boy, you would not be able to handle weapons. The way the Irish did it, the Celtic people did it in Ireland. Uh, Not only did they do something like this, but then you even still, before you could actually be a man, you had to learn the rules of dance and song and poetry. You had to practice these things before they would give you a sword or a spear or anything, because they knew boys and weapons, it's not good for the culture. It's not good for the culture. Carl Rittenhouse, boy with a powerful weapon. Doesn't make any difference if you got to be 18 if you're uninitiated. We are in an uninitiated culture, which means it's an adolescent culture, which means it's not too deep and it's destructive. And it's not just American culture, it's be Western culture. See, we're destroying the planet. We're destroying. It's like we're in a spaceship on Earth, a beautiful spaceship, and we're throwing parts out of it left and right. And we don't, Amazon rainforest. That's an adolescent culture. We're not responsible. We're not like an adult culture. We can be though, and even in a culture like this, there are people who have upgraded to this adult operating system, which comes from an entirely different place. You see, fierce grace. So this is a basic paradox you get in the first part. Every one of these fierce truths is paradoxical. That we find out that what really transforms us is two things: great love and great suffering. Those are the two kinds of grace we're looking at: great love and great suffering. Okay, and you can't have just half of it. This is not two, as the ultimate mystic understanding is not two. You say, well, hey, that doesn't seem like grace to me, but works that way. So that's the first point. There's a lot more to it, but basically just to see, well, all right, this pain, what do I do with it? Am I going to give it to somebody else, act it out, blame somebody, or am I going to own it and then transform it? And you have to hold it. That's the middle ground between acting out and repressing, taking it inside into unconsciousness. I don't want to think about this. To actually stay conscious of it and hold it until it transforms. That's a lot of what you do in contemplative sitting, by the way. Because you don't always feel great when it's the time to sit. You might not feel great today. You might have a lot of emotional, psychological, spiritual, or physical pain right now. That doesn't keep you from sitting. As a matter of fact, that's what you sit with. You hold it in awareness. Now, the second point, there's a paradox in that too, of course. You are not that important. Well, the ego doesn't like to hear that. We spend our lives getting little stickers, and you got to do that for little kids in grade school. You got to give them awards and stickers, like, you're the best in this or whatever. You got to do a little bit of that with a childhood operating system, because otherwise they shrivel a little bit. So we got to meet people, pat us on the back and whatever. But then at some point, when you've had 12 years of that, you got to have the message: hey, you're not that important. And the you that they're talking about is this superficial self, the managerial self. It's fine. The superficial self, the narcissistic self. You have to be narcissistic to start out. It has to be about me, to give you the energy to develop, to pull out the power to pull away from your family and actually step out on your own. So, a childhood thing is basically, it's got to have its roots in me. And it's sorry, that's all right. There's a time and a place for that. And actually, for what we call the ego, they're talking about the ego there. You are not that important. The ego is not that important. Your whole shtick is not that important. The superficial self is fine, but it's not who you are. It's, ultimately, if it dies back, if you get a handle on it and you really understand what it is, it's there to help you manage time and space. You guys showed up at 7:30 or 6:30 or whatever, and that's great. I'm glad you're here. But that's only a part of it, and the least part of it. Then there's the deep self, the truth self, something else that's wired to eternity, that's wired to the divine, that's wired to the transcendent. So you're not that important. And we hold that paradox too, that we're both, that's in a Christian sense, they say, you have a spark of the divine in you that you want to fan during your life. You want it to come out and radiate and go out to the other people, that you're both human and divine. That's a paradox. I'm reading Ernest Becker's book that's called The Denial of Death. It's a bit heady, but it's amazing. And he talks about this point when you realize that you're both human and divine. He's got a great metaphor. He says, it's a shock when we realize that we're a God who shits. We're a God who shits. In other words, we do have this divinity in us, but also we have this humanity too. And they both go together. They both go together. Okay. And so when you realize there's these two parts of yourself, and that the superficial, egoic, managerial part of your brain, left brain is the manager, is fine. If you didn't have an ego, you'd be a psychotic. You couldn't even get to the bathroom. You couldn't organize anything. And if, on the other hand, if that's all you have is the ego, you can become a sociopath, narcissist, president, but you can do a lot of damage because you're a kid. You're not an adult, you see. You have no responsibility. Kids don't take the responsibility. That might ring in your ears a little bit. That's dangerous. So we gotta realize this, that there's something else. That's what Jesus is pointing to when he talks to in the Gospel of Thomas. My favorite wisdom saying from Jesus is, he tells Thomas, they're all saying, Lord, save us. We know you're the Messiah. You're going to save us. Why don't you get to it here? And he says to Thomas, he says, no, Thomas, if you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. But if you do not bring forth what is within you, what you do not bring forth will destroy you. Well, why? Well, because you remain an adolescent. You remain in this childhood operating system. Jesus is talking about bringing forth that inner divinity. That really is the kingdom of heaven, and it's in us. It's not later. It's not over there. The kingdom of heaven is among us. See? So that it's a kind of paradoxical. You're not that important. Well, realize what he's talking about is your persona, the face, your whole project of who you are. It questions that. And it says there's something deeper. Can you bring that forth? That's also why you go into contemplative practice. That is the essence of it. Now, the third one really goes with it. These are all in their best. Your life is not about you. Well, then what is it? It's not about you. It means it's not about this whole ego project that you might have. No, you're called to do something else, to bring forth something else that you don't even know what it is. That's what they used to call your vocation, your calling. We are automatically just training kids to do a job. It's really, education is more like have the skills to do this job or that job. It's not bad, but it's so limited. Again, it's a question of these two levels. It's not about success from a mystic point of view. It's about divinization. It's about bringing out that divine part of yourself. Some people, in poetic terms, they call them muse, but you're called to do something specific. And we don't even know what it is. And especially if you're burned out in your job or you feel like you just it wasn't it. Well, it's a vocation. And so part of to hear this voice, this calling, is you've got to be in silence and listen. And the interesting paradox is your life itself is the message. Rohr coined this in this teaching. He said, you cannot think your way into a new way of living. You can only live your way into a new way of thinking. Take that in. So you're still trying to figure it out. If you're trying to figure out your life, you're still in the childhood. You're trying to make sense of it all. That's still childhood program. You're trying to, reason your way through it. Still a childhood program. Not bad. We do need to use reason for some things, but not for the meaning of your own life, not for your own vocation. You cannot think your way into a new way of living. You can only live your way into a new way of thinking. And so that brings direct experience into it. You see, he's talking there. He's just saying, that's why Jesus sent the disciples out 2 by 2 and told them, don't take anything. Take a staff, maybe some sandals, but that's it. And when you show up somewhere, whoever takes you in to feed you, and this is radical for a Jew, he says, eat whatever they serve you. Forget about kosher here. We're talking about going into life naked, essentially. And so, the apostles figured Jesus was sending them out to like convert people to Jesus' way. Not at all. They didn't even know what Jesus' way was. Jesus' way was what he sent them out to do, which is just to walk into situations without holding on to anything and trust that you will be fed, etc. So he was sending them in to plunge into really contemplative living. It wasn't that they were going to be teaching people, it's that they were going to learn what Jesus had been talking about. You can only live your way into a new way of thinking. You cannot think your way. Our old cultures used to, they were better at this than we are. I mean, I grew up in the 50s. I had confirmation at age 12. The bishop slapped me on the cheek. Well, I'm telling you, it didn't do it. If it had done it, I wouldn't have messed up my marriage twice. Didn't do it. Bar mitzvah, bat mitzvah doesn't really do it. I mean, these are things that are just vestiges of the real thing. So to meditate on these 3 things, these 5 things, it's powerful because you're actually getting back to the root of it. You got to live your way into this next. And you don't even know what it is. You don't know the way. You just got to live your way into a new way of thinking. You will never think your way to enlightenment. That's not what enlightenment was about. That's why the Buddha is, he's sitting there and not thinking about anything. He's experiencing whatever he's experiencing. That's what contemplation is about. You leave thinking behind. Contemplation is about leaping into the world of direct experience, not words, not thought. We got to do that. We got to mix the 2. We got to think. It doesn't mean, that you give up being rational or thinking. It means you got to go beyond reason. Add that second part. Okay, now this leads us to when I came back from Kendra's to Mary Wright's house after Nick. I saw the whiteboard. I came back and I could only remember 4 of the 5. Guess what? I couldn't remember. My ego was blocking it out. You're not in control. Which, if you're at the top of the Enneagram, well, this is heresy. Gee, I wish somebody had told me this, growing up. It's impossible. You're not in control. That's the beauty of the 12 steps, probably our only real addition to spirituality of America. And some of the guys who come through the 12 step, these guys they go in kids and they come out adults if it works for them. First step, you admit that you are powerless to control, fill in the blank. It could be alcohol, it could be methamphetamine, it could be sex, it could be, codependency. Doesn't matter. The first step is you admit you are powerless to control your life. Now that is fierce, and that takes you into the paradox. Because look, the first half of life, it is all about learning self-control. It's all about creating a container that you can contain this sort of wild energy that young people have, And so you as Rohr says, you build a container for it, and that's appropriate for the first half of life. It can be a small container, Hunt's tomato paste. It can be a bigger container and a more transparent container. Well, these are some jalapeno things, some nice jalapeno things, but it's transparent. So yeah, I could say, oh yeah. Well, all right, you can sort of see through it. That's great. Uh, it can even be like a kind of beautiful container, like one of these crystal containers. Is still a container, and it's all important. It's all important for the first half of life, but it won't make it for the second half of life. Um, Teresa of Avila. I'm looking for her quote here. Do I have it? Yeah. She said, all concepts of God are like a jar we break. Listen to that again. Teresa of Avila. All concepts of God are like a jar we break. Yeah, it must be shattered. See, and so something shattering has to happen for most of us. Even if you're initiated, something shattering has to happen. Rohr calls it necessary suffering. Something has to be shattered to enter really fully into this adult operating system. And you need one in the second half of life. And shattering things do start to happen the longer you live. People die, you get old, your age is shattering for some people. No matter how many facelifts we have, we know we're doing it. And, we're getting closer to this, to number 5. We're getting closer to that. The Denial of Death book by is about that mostly Western culture is built on trying to keep ourselves occupied so we can deny the fact that we're ever going to die. And it's always been true, but we perfected it until you can't distract yourself anymore. And then it's a big friggin' surprise, and you're not ready for it. See, so these shattering things happen. Uh, so that's point 5 here. I'm going to die. All the heroic projects of men are a kind of overcompensation for this paralyzing fear of death. I mean, Q, Bezos, Elon Musk, Richard Branson. I mean, what is this all about here? It's so transparent, when you look at it, but we all do the same kind of thing. We got some kind of heroic project we're going to do, and to keep us occupied so we don't face the fact that, hey, we got a term limit here. This ends sometime. And that's the biggest paradox here. In avoiding death, ironically, we're avoiding life. William Wallace in the Braveheart fame, he said, every man dies, but every man doesn't truly live. Not every man truly lives. Every man dies, but not every man truly lives. So what's going on here? So, what dies? I've been using the mystic thing. It comes from Quran, die before you die. Well, what dies? What are we talking about here? Not talking about killing yourself. We're talking about your addiction to your childhood operating system, your belief that this will keep working, despite all the evidence, that you're not that happy, or if you're afraid of death and you just don't want to even think about it. A lot of people didn't come because they saw point 5, you're going to die. Well, hell, I don't know going there. Well, you guys did. You showed up. That's pretty great. And see, these are all they're all interconnected, because how can you face death? How can you not put it out of the way? How can you keep that in consciousness? Well, like the Sioux, Lakota Sioux, one of their classes said, today's a good day to die. That was Crazy Horse's motto. He got up every day. That's why they called him crazy. He got up every day and he said, today is a good day to die. And not just going into battle, but just waking up. That's why they, and he had a crazy horse in a dream too, but still he was a mystic. He was a Sioux mystic. We had a hard time finding that guy. I'm not sure we ever killed him. We got Sitting Bull, but I'm not sure we ever captured Crazy Horse. He still, he was a mystic. They thought the arrows couldn't hit him. Well, maybe they couldn't. I mean, this real life is already running through you. I mean, Jesus gives us these great images, especially the woman at the well is one of the best images when she wasn't even a Jew. She was an enemy. And he's talking to her when he sends the guys out to go get some food and they're in foreign enemy territory. And he's sitting by this well and the woman shows up and they have really a great conversation. You could do a whole thing on the woman at the well. Maybe I will sometime because it's a deep thing, but she'd come in to get water. You know, that's what women's work was in those days. You hauled the water. And he said, I could show you a way that I could give you some water that your thirst will quench your thirst forever. And she says, how do I get that water? Well, he's talking about that inner thing. That this is once you get in touch with this, you're not looking for those other things, and that's. I mean, I'm pretty sure that's why all of you are here. Why would you be here if you didn't have some sense of that? Once you taste that water, from the inner spring, once you taste that water, you don't quite forget it. That's what the Buddhists call the one taste. And maybe you'll get it. Maybe you got it through the talk today, a little bit of taste, a little bit of fragrance of what we're talking about. Maybe you get it in the sitting. That's really what you get in the sitting when you go into contemplation, when you just let all words and programming, because we got a lot of bad theology programmed into us. Anybody raised Christian, there's a lot of containers you got to smash along the way. The transcendent's not the problem. It's all our concepts, all our concepts. Mirabai Starr, who's a kind of a mystic who lives in the Santa Fe, she said, once you know the God of love, you fire all the other gods. Once you know the God of love, and I mean know it, sort of in the biblical sense. You've had relations with a God. Once you know the God of love, you fire all the other gods. The God of success, the God of, looking beautiful, the God of impressing everybody. We have all these other gods. The gods show up in the Garden of Eden too. The gods talk Adam and Eve into, and they weren't, they were just kids. They were just kids. But that's what happens. So, yeah, I love that. So once you know the God of love, you fire all the other gods. Yeah, here. Well, all right. We'll take 10 here or 15. We'll come back at quarter after, and then we'll jump into just the realm of pure experience. Well, of course, we have this kind of stuff front loaded, but we're actually going to just see what more there is because, did the best I could with this, but there's a lot more for you in these 5 points. And so if you can go in just to direct experience, spend some time, not so much thinking about it, but letting it land in a tangible way, then we'll really have a rich and productive final session at 11. So, all right, 10:15. I'll see you there.